let's get into the first topic of conversation. Damar Hamlin. Thank God he's got neurological signs. He's active. He's moving around in terms of visibly his eyes are open. He's communicating with the doctors. I think he's writing things down, which is how he's able to vocalize because he's got a tube in his mouth, right? Because he's not breathing on his own. If I'm not mistaken, that was the update we received.
Yeah, I think he's still on a ventilator to a certain extent. I don't know what the actual percentage is. All I know is that since Monday he was 100% on oxygen via a ventilator. Then it was 50%, and then I'm assuming since he's made some pretty significant progress, the amount of oxygen that he's taking from the ventilator is continuing to decrease. I don't know to what extent, but
Right.
now the fact that he's actually alert and he's awake and he's
To an extent,
responsive,
coherent as well.
he's
Yeah.
responsive, and he has a movement in his extremities as well, which is huge.
So, I mean, we're just going to talk about this briefly. We know that this happened on Monday. I mean, Kyle and I were texting each other that entire process, like shook, just like the rest of the world was. So let's just talk about it for the sake of thank God he's okay. Let's clarify with when it happened. And we're talking about resuscitation and CPR and the AED having to be used. And for those of you that are unaware, it's what doctors use clear, like that's the
It's
one
a,
that's the portable one,
it's a
the
defibrillator.
defibrillator.
Yep.
So the fact that that had to happen on a football field in the professional setting, granted, high school, middle school, Pop Warner, whatever it is, the fact that that had to be utilized to save someone's life is probably the most eye-opening experience I've ever seen on television because we know that this isn't the WWE, this is something like that. This is real.
Mhm.
Kyle, I gotta ask you, as somebody who played the game for a multitude of years, who's put his body out there, what did this hit do to you psychologically? Did it shake you more because you felt like you've seen this hit, you've experienced a kind of hit like this? Like, did it scare you a little bit more? Like, just talk about your feelings if you don't mind.
Well, I mean, when it comes to the hit itself that Damar took from T. Higgins, it was a pretty simple hit. I mean, T was running with the ball and lowered his shoulder into Damar's chest. And I mean, to be honest, Kev, I mean, I've taken similar type of hits. Granted, I never played professionally. Like, I never got anywhere close to that. I mean, the farthest I got was high school football. But yeah, there were times where I took similar shots. It didn't have the outcome that Damar unfortunately went through. And when I look back at that play specifically, I just don't think Damar was expecting T. Higgins to hit him as high as he did. I think, I think as a defensive player, just with him in that moment, I think he was thinking that T may have was going to hit him a little bit lower, maybe like the lower rib cage area, maybe around the stomach, just where T was at that moment in the play. But I think he got surprised by where T hit him in the chest. And then, I mean, the play was over. I mean, he gets T gets tackled by Damar, and then Damar pops right back up on his feet, and then obviously everybody knows that he collapsed within a half a second to a second later, and then there's a 30-minute delay where essentially Damar was not only unconscious, I mean his heart stopped. They had to resuscitate him on the field, and like Kevin had already said, they had to use a defibrillator to get his heart back into rhythm, and essentially what I think a lot of people were saying about the hit that he took was that it knocked his heart out of rhythm. And depending on how much trauma that you take in the chest, that's blunt force trauma, yeah, it could stop your heart. And that's exactly what happened. He went into cardiac arrest and he collapsed on the field. It was just absolutely insane based off of the fact that, to be honest with you, Kev, I've never really seen anything like that before. The thing that kind of got me that was a little bit weird or a little bit scary, you could say, was the fact that it was just a typical hit. I mean, Kev, these guys are flying around at, 15, 20 miles an hour, and there have been worse hits than what we saw Damar take from T. Higgins, where you don't have this type of outcome. And, maybe that's kind of the scarier part is that, it was the type of hit that he took, and it had this unbelievable and catastrophic result. It's just, it could shake you a little bit. And I think everybody was shaken up, based off of what happened. And fortunately, now that we're a couple of days removed from that Monday night game between the Bills and the Bengals, we can accurately say at this point, or we could definitively say that Damar is making tremendous strides in his recovery. I mean, it's one thing, to be able to be conscious and alert, but the fact that he's neurologically sound or he's functional in that regard and he's moving his extremities around and he can respond, that is that's phenomenal. The fact that he's making these amount of strides within essentially a 72-hour window from that initial collapse that he suffered on the field on Monday night. And, you know, I'm not even going to go anything into about what his football career is going to hold. I'm not really going to dive into that yet because, as far as I'm concerned, that's not really what's important right now. The most important thing, as far as I see, is he is making tremendous strides in his recovery. And Kev, I have to kind of say that just before I wrap this up, the amount of respect and the amount of appreciation that I have for the medical staff of the Bills and the Bengals and the medical staff at the University of Cincinnati Hospital in Cincinnati. It's phenomenal what they've been able to do with Damar just based off of how they've been treating him uh, since the initial collapse that he suffered on the field and the subsequent care that he's gotten at the hospital over the last couple of days. Kev, I mean, the medical personnel on the field saved his life. There's no other way to put it. And when we look back at some of the reactions that we saw from the players on the Bills, I think that they were fully convinced that he died on the field. And technically, that actually did happen. When you get resuscitated, I mean, his heart stopped. So, technically, he did die, and then they brought him back, which is just, I mean, it's a miracle as far as I'm concerned that not only were they able to bring him back, and within a couple of days, he's responsive and neurologically functional, which is just, it's amazing. It's the best case scenario, uh, coming into, well, it's going to be Friday, but by the end of the week compared to where we were at the beginning of the week, it's amazing as far as I've seen it. And I think, as we continue over the next couple days, obviously, we'll be getting more updates about Damar's status, and hopefully it's just one step in front of another, and he's making that progress to the point where maybe he gets discharged from the hospital sooner rather than later, because I think a lot of people initially were thinking, man, this isn't looking good, just based off of what we saw initially within the first 15 30 minutes on the field in Cincinnati, because I think that there were a lot of people that legitimately thought that he was going to die on the football field. And honestly, I was probably one of those people included. So one of the last things that I'll say, it's really, I think, rallied not only the Buffalo Bills, but the NFL community to a larger extent as well, because I think millions of people are pulling for Damar based off what they saw on Monday night. And I think I think now we're kind of getting to the point where we can take a sigh of relief collectively based on where we were on Monday, knowing that he's making these remarkable strides in his recovery. So it's incredible. And, like I said, it's just all the thanks in the world to the medical staff at the hospital and the medical personnel with the Bills and the Bengals. It, it's almost indescribable, the amount of appreciation that I have to those individuals for essentially saving Damar's life. So, Kev, I'll let you take it from here.
I mean, I don't really have much else to say, honestly, aside from my own personal opinion of what I saw, how I feel. I mean, like Kyle said, shout out to the medical staff. They saved the young man's life. That's first and foremost. This is a game for entertainment, and at that point, I don't believe anybody was going to be entertained with anything but knowing and finding out if Damar was going to be okay. I'm actually happy the NFL called that game. I think that was the right decision, again, in my personal opinion, because I believe that both teams were just too messed up, too distracted, too focused on, their brother's safety. And I mean, like, you saw Josh Allen crying, you saw multiple players tearing up on their knees, praying, circling at midfield to just, hold together and trying to will Damar, back to good health with just prayer and their belief. And it was, again, it was incredible to see how the league came together, but it was just, again, massively eye-opening that people put their lives on the line to play this game for our benefit in terms of for our eyes, for our fandom. Yes, for a paycheck, absolutely, but football's a game just like any other sport. And when someone's life is at a pass like this and it's a crossroads of they could die or they can never be the same again. And, obviously I will 110% take a life being saved and preserved as opposed to playing this game. You're not going to die if you don't play this again. You'll be fine. And I'm just thankful that he woke up, he's getting better. And again, like for the league to prioritize his health and to cut that game. I mean, I believe Stephon Diggs was at the hospital like within an hour, maybe even a little bit more, right after the game was called. And that's just, you want to be by your brother's side. You want to be by your teammate's side. You want to be by your friend's side. And it's just super, super crazy to think that happened on such a routine, what looked to be a routine hit. I mean, we've seen people get their heads knocked off. We've seen highlights of plays from the 70s and the 80s when there were no roughing the passer, when there were no dirty hits. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, they were dirty, but I mean, like, they weren't deemed dirty. They were just football plays. And people get up and they're fine. And by fine, obviously, I know CTE is a thing and concussions and all these things. I'm talking, I've never seen a hit knock somebody out to the point where they're technically classified as dead and needed to be resuscitated. So, again, just praying for his health, his family's peace of mind. Of course, at the end of the day, everybody is also looking at T. Higgins. Can't blame the man. And when I say looking at him, I'm not saying looking to blame. It's just he's forever going to be attached to the situation because he's the one that made the contact with Damar. So, hopefully he has some mental relief now that his mom came out, and by his, I mean Damar's mom came out and made a statement, to leave T. Higgins alone, to not to blame him. This isn't his fault. There's nothing he could have done. And then, of course, for Josh Allen to take the podium today and also say the same thing, and multiple NFL players, there's not much you can do. You sign a contract to play a game. You take a risk every time you put the helmet and pads on, and this is unfortunately one of those risks. I think now that it's actually happened, it's going to bring some attention now to maybe altering some equipment, whether that is altering chest plates, whether that is making athletes wear an additional, maybe like a thicker version of those undergarment shirts that have those small cushion padding. I have no idea what the league is going to do, but again, just super happy Damar's doing okay. And I don't really want to harp on it anymore because the important part is he's healthy, or excuse me, getting healthier. And I don't want that to be lost in translation.